Hi everyone. Hi Heidi.
Hello.
So tonight I have Heidi Pollard with me, and we're going to talk about toxic workplaces because you've actually experienced that yourself.
I have indeed.
So you've lived through that situation, and you give us some handy hints, I'm sure, to get through it ourselves. So how did it happen for you? Like, you were corporate, obviously, and what happened to you?
Yeah, so early on in my career, I probably spent a lot of time in corporate and in government. And I was really fortunate. Some of my very first workplaces, excuse me, were really lovely. And I had some great bosses and very supportive. And I thought that's what work was.
Yeah.
Because early on in the career, that's what I experienced. And then I went to a couple of places where it was quite challenging and very micromanaging, and started to go, oh, so it's not all roses and everyone doesn't love you necessarily. But then I experienced one workplace that was incredibly toxic in that blame, excuses, denial was kind of the run of the day. Really bureaucratic, a very strong organisation that was looking to find fault in things. It was part of what they did. And I just found myself in a situation where I was working longer and longer hours. My team themselves were lovely people, and I was doing everything I could to keep them buoyant, but it was just so hard. It was like pushing water uphill, because it didn't matter what you tried or what you did, someone found fault with it, or you were accused of things, and claims of bullying and harassment were rampant. And I actually had a staff member lock me in my office one night and accuse me of having favouritism over someone else, and he was like spitting and frothing at the mouth, and I couldn't get out, and was accusing me of all sorts of things, and I had no idea where it came from. But I'm not surprised in a way, because the whole environment of the nature of everyone working was like that. And in my gut, I'd known when I went for the job interview, in that I looked around and went, this is an unusual workplace. Everyone was quiet, and I noticed there was no personal pictures or photos. No one was chit-chatting with each other.
You picked it up initially.
I picked it up and kind of went, oh, something's odd. And when I went in for the interview, I can remember the chair, as they got me to sit down, I said, look, before I sit down, what do you guys do for fun? And he looked at me, and he put his glasses on the end of his nose, and he said, we have a social club.
Oh no, it's like something out of a movie.
I know, and I was like, oh, maybe this is not the workplace for me. And they ended up, I guess, offering me the job a couple of times before I took it. And I took it because I saw I could make a difference there. But from my very first week, like, I organised a barbecue for the second week I was there to try and get to know other departments.
Was it a social club thing? Or?
Unofficial barbecue. But really just to get to know other departments. And I got several emails back after I'd sent out the invitation. One stating that you'd think someone that was a senior manager like me could punctuate things better, and that there was a comma missing.
Oh dear.
And then I got another one saying, had I done a risk assessment of the gas bottle?
Oh no.
And another one saying, why had I not included some department that I hadn't realised existed at another location? And so,
was this a government situation?
That was, yeah. And so I was like, what the hell have I got myself into?
And you weren't having it on the work premises, you were having it in your home?
No, I was having it on the work premises. It was a workplace kind of thing, yeah. So I learnt very quickly that you weren't allowed to have fun at work. And I managed to have fun with my team, but it really became very challenging, particularly around budgets and policies, and just what was being dictated that we were needed to do. And I was often looking for the right thing to do and what was the best use of our funds and resources, and was always getting squeezed for that. And just found it getting more and more toxic. And as I said, I was working really long hours, so probably at least doing 16-hour days there, and yet never felt like I was getting ahead.
Did you have a life?
Yeah, I didn't really. And that was part of the problem. It really did start to impact on all areas of my life. And I'm generally a pretty buoyant person, and so I found I was still going to the gym and exercising and eating well, but it really started to have an impact on my relationships, on my health. And I would have told you I was fine. And I thought I was, and I thought I could keep all the plates spinning and manage it all, but it really
How did you find the
started
time to go to
sucking
the
the
gym?
life out of me. Yeah, well, I went in my lunchtime, or late at night and all of those sorts of things. And I commuted to it as well, so there was travel on top of that. So it just kind of started to drain me, and I realised I'm never going to win against this. And I thought I could gradually, you know, maybe impact the system, but I realised it was far bigger than me. And there were too many political things going on in game playing. And having said that, they went through a few ICAC investigations later on in the piece, which doesn't surprise me at all, because there was a lot of boys club or just people who looked after each other, and anyone who bucked the trend or tried to do anything innovative was not encouraged.
Did anyone ever come to you, like any workmate or anything like that, come to you and tell you of anything? Or
So lots of people, and interestingly, lots of people put in claims for different reasons, and there was just lots of stress. So everyone was on edge. People had short, you know, ropes were snappy, all of those sorts of things. I was involved in a couple of claims that people had made against the organisation in general, and they got quite challenging. And what I found really challenging was a full investigation was done, and I kept asking questions about what did they find, and they said, oh, we can't tell you, it's all confidential. And yet I'd been kind of dragged into it. And it was only maybe 6 months later when I really asked, can I see stuff or what's going on with it? They said, oh, you've been excused, so you've got no problem. But I hadn't been told that. So the whole time I was sitting going, am I in trouble or not? And yeah, it was just a really challenging workplace.
how long were you in that position for?
I was there 7 years.
How did you last 7
I don't know.
years?
Well, I nearly didn't.
Wow.
And I thought I could really change the system. And I worked with some really great people, don't get me wrong. There were some fabulous people there. But a lot of, you know, some of the senior managers were dictators, and it was my way or the highway, and there was just different politics at play. And so I think that's really hard for people when they're working for a manager or a leader who maybe doesn't have their best interests at heart. And so
how do you sack your boss?
Yeah.
Like, how do you sack your boss?
Yeah. Well, and you virtually have to, and you have to start creating boundaries for yourself and starting to go, what will I accept and what will I not? And I know when I eventually left, the writing for me was on the wall, because I started hearing myself in meetings saying, I want it noted in the minutes that I disagree with this. And I started getting more and more strong about that. And so I essentially had to sack my boss. Yeah.
So did sickness fall on you because of this situation?
Yeah, so, and I, as I said, would have told you I was okay, and I was just running on adrenaline, basically. But I had tests done, and my female hormones were gone, so no period for a couple of years, female hormones gone.
Wow.
Adrenal fatigue. You know, when they tested different things through, you know, different blood tests and that they do, they said, you know, a level 5 is a heart attack level, and I was at 4.9. And they were like, how are you still functioning? And I would have told you I was okay, because it's like that slow, you know, boil where you think, oh, I'm okay. I was a bit stressed, but I can generally juggle stuff pretty well. But clearly my body was in shutdown mode.
So how did you make the changes? Like, what was your first step? Because I know that there'd be a lot of my viewers out there now that are in this situation right now. And they'd be saying, well, you know, I'm one voice. Like, how do I make the changes? What are the things that I can do to make the changes?
Absolutely. And I think, you know, the position I was in had good salary and all of that, so you end up being in a golden handcuffs sometimes. And really it's about starting to realise, firstly, recognising that this is happening, and maybe talking to other people. So I did have a coach and a counsellor and started getting some support around me, but that took a while even to reach out for that. And I think you have to start, as I would say, being more up yourself. You have to start going, what fills my cup? You know, what are the things that I enjoy, and how do I bring more of that into my day, even if it's not at work, but what can I do to buffer myself? So I was doing things, and I guess I survived so long there because I had rituals in my day that were about filling up my cup.
Do you want to share some of those?
Yeah, so meditation, walking my dogs, you know, spending time in nature. But for me, it was more of that, also having a circle of friends and people outside of the business to make sure that I had sanity checks. You know, am I going insane, or is this, you know, not normal?
And we do talk about that a lot on this show, about how important it is to have a great network around you.
Absolutely.
And to have that support, so that people are there to support you no matter what choices you make.
Yeah.
But to have the right people around you that are supportive and positive
Most
in
definitely.
what you're doing.
Most definitely. And I'd hired a coach to see if someone could help me work better. Because I was like,
Oh, wow.
I've somehow got to work smarter. And I think I always thought it's me, you know. And so I'd hired a coach, and they were kind of like, this is not normal. But in what they were doing, I started going, I really like what they're doing, and how could I do that? So I started my coach training, which I saw as part of my segue out. And I was also really fortunate that I had been investing in property for some time on the side as well. And so I knew that financially, you know what, if I've got to throw in the towel and, you know, have no job for a while, I'm okay. I can sell a house or
virtually you're
something.
setting yourself up to leave within your own mind. You're ready to leave, but you're building your own little business on the side.
So my counsellor said to me, false start, try again, because
Yes.
I tried to resign 3 times. And literally handed in my resignation 3 times before I eventually got there. So she just kept saying, false start, try again, you know, kind of thing. And it wasn't until she sat with me and said, right, we're going to write your letter of resignation again, but this time you're going to prepare all your files, you're going to take a month to do all of your handover notes, you're going to write your speech to your staff, you're going to, you know, basically work yourself out of the job so you can't back out of the leaving. And so I literally put all of that in place until the last day came, and I was like, well, that's it.
So that'd be a great strategy for anyone watching.
Absolutely.
Is to
Pre-plan.
pre-plan, look at the steps that you can take to manage that escape, so to speak, isn't
Absolutely.
it really?
So having an exit plan and an escape strategy, and for me it was having my property on the side helped me start to create, you know, a buffer so that I wasn't at risk of, you know, poverty if I lost my job, and I wasn't living just week to week. But really it was about the mindset and the strategy of going, you know, I can leave, this is okay. And I felt really responsible for my staff, and anyone who's in a team or feels like, oh, if I leave, this is all going to go, you know, bad. I really felt for my staff. So that was part of what kept me there as well, is wanting to take care of them. And I realised that I couldn't continue to do that, and I was no good to anyone if I was, you know, exhausted or in a hospital bed.
That's so true for anyone, for yourself especially.
Yeah, so really it was the exit strategy, and having the coach hold me accountable and go, right, you know, have you done that part, and pushing me to do that.
So you mentioned, you know, working from that, and you've turned things into the positive. And I know there's a couple of aspects here. So the one thing that I heard you talk about is up yourself.
Yeah.
So I'm just thinking, hang on a minute, can you just explain that?
Yeah. And lots of people say to me, what the hell, you know? And I actually think here in Australia in particular, and I know there might be people watching elsewhere around the world as well, but probably it's in lots of Western countries, but we have a confidence crisis here. And we have a real issue with tall poppy syndrome, and we don't want to appear up ourselves. And so we often put ourselves down, but that sometimes means that we're not taking care of ourselves. And so being up yourself is not about, you know, being snobby. It's about taking care of yourself. It's kind of a self-care thing, and going, what makes me be up? And noticing, what are my downers, or I call them drainers and gainers. So what are the things that drain me of energy? And more I started to see my workplace was draining me. And the things that lifted me up were writing, you know, connecting, networking, coaching, and all of those things. So I started to go, how do I start pulling that balance so that I start getting more of what brings me up and less of what drains me? And it started to be people also. So people at work, I had to start going, how do I spend less time with that person? And maybe get one of my managers to have the dealings with them, or whatever it was, to start buffering and protecting myself. Yeah.
Okay, so do you run workshops, or is that what is it all about? Like, how does it work?
So I do all sorts of things with the daily optimism. So I send out daily messages that are just kind of quirky, and I'm being very tame, but sometimes I have a bit of a potty mouth. So my daily optimisms are, you know, a bit humorous. They're kind of jokes, quotes and notes that come to me for inspiration. So I send those out every day just to give people a pick-me-up. And
so how does someone get onto your list?
They can just go to our website, uqpower.com.au, and look up daily optimisms.
So what is it again?
uqpower.com.au.
Okay, so this is where you can get your little things sent out
Yeah,
to
and
you.
just look up daily optimism, and you'll get one sent to your inbox every day. But I do run workshops, and I'm writing a book at the moment about being up yourself and how to do that.
So cool.
And up actually stands for your unique power. So it's understanding what's my power within, what makes me uniquely me, and how do I be more that? Because what I found in so many of the workplaces was people just trying but pretending and not being themselves and not fully stepping into their power. So people pleasing or being imposter syndromes and trying to fit in, rather than going, what are my unique strengths? And a lot of the work that I do now with CEOs and businesses on their culture is all around how do you recognize your employees for what's great about that individual and let them be that. So not just go, that's your position description and that's it, but starting to go, what are their skills and their strengths and what makes them great and how do we allow them to flourish? So really treating each employee not as a number but as a unique individual, which means managers have to talk to staff and get to know them as a human.
Certainly, so many things are changing in that culture and the work culture.
Absolutely.
Which is great.
Yeah.
I'll high five you on that one. So we also spoke about, well, we touched on the fact that you were investing in property on the side.
I love property.
So we all love property.
Yeah, we do.
It's whether or not you can afford to actually go and do something about it. And I know there'll be a lot of people saying that, I'll never get that opportunity. And I know that affordable housing is very dear to my heart, and I hear it's dear to your heart too, because I feel that we've reached that stage now. Where do you get affordable housing for someone that's, middle-aged, on their own, can only borrow so much from a bank, but what does it get them? Absolutely nothing.
Yes, or you've got to go so far out west. There's no other services.
And a lot of people just give up.
Yeah.
So what's your dealings with affordable housing? What's the one thing that you've kind of looked at and thought, what a great idea?
Yeah, so lots of different things, but I think I started to see over the past few years with a lot of my properties, I started seeing tenant stress. So people unable to pay their rent. Whereas the first decade I probably had properties, I didn't seem to see that so much. Families just paid their rent and, I fixed things when they needed it, but it wasn't an issue.
Do you think it's the price of rents these days?
Yeah, I think it's a number of things. And if people lose their job, the fact that they live week to week, they're just totally in distress straight away. And so I started to notice more and more, might have 5, 6, 7 lots of families saying we're going to need to pay our rent late, or can we pay it off, or it's Christmas, we've got no money. And so I had people on payment plans and started to notice more and more a lot of tenant distress. And in the same boat, I started to see homelessness and get involved through an initiative I'm involved with, Human Power, started to see homelessness and just how much that was increasing. And I think it's very hidden. It's not just people who are rough sleeping in the street, it's couch surfing. And so as I would advertise a property for rent, I would start to see more and more people applying. And say if it was not a house but an apartment, it might be a 1-bedroom apartment, I'd have 70 or 80 people apply, and some of those would be families with 3 and 4 children.
Wow.
And I'd be like, it's a 1-bedroom apartment, like you're not going to fit. And they'd say, we're living in someone's lounge room, or we're renting a room and we need somewhere. So I realised how desperate the situation had gotten. And a lot of my current tenants were ringing me going, I've got a cousin, a friend, an uncle, an aunt that needs somewhere, will you please take them because they cannot get anywhere. And I would have people who would say they were on the housing waiting list and they're waiting 9 years. And what can I do?
So I had someone that had a phone call not that long ago.
Right.
20 years they've been on the list and they got the phone call.
Wow, there you go. See?
But the funny thing was, even though they had the same phone number,
Yeah.
their whole circumstances had
Has
changed.
changed in
Where
20 years.
They just stood there and went, I can honestly say I don't need it.
I don't need you now.
Yeah,
there you
so
go.
20 years.
Yeah, it's very, very real. And so for me, I started to look at what else could we do? And I came across the whole concept of tiny houses, which is huge in Canada and America and other countries, but it's really very new here. And the granny flat provisions here have allowed a bit of that. So I do have a couple of properties with granny flats on them, which is great because then you can offer a low income kind of housing. And I began to see how that was more affordable for people. And they just want safe, decent, clean housing. But also then people with mortgages getting in distress and not able to pay off their mortgages. And so I thought, well, tiny houses actually fits both bills because you can park one on your property, help pay off your own mortgage and give someone, a low income kind of housing affordability. So I'm right in the thick of investigating that at the moment and have been researching that quite an extent and really see that as a potential solution. That means people don't have to go right out west, say, to get affordable housing, that this could be done in residential blocks in
So you're saying like
cities.
Existing residential blocks?
Yeah, because I'm talking about tiny houses on wheels,
Yes.
so they're movable, and so they're treated a bit like a caravan. So you can't go and set up a village of them.
Yes.
But you could have one on your block, and it's treated like a caravan. So it's not seen in the same way as a building. So you don't need building approvals by councils. You're allowed to park your caravan in the same way you're allowed to park a tiny house. And so it just has more options, I think, for people. Yeah, and you could have them on grid or off grid, so they could just plug into power or have solar or whatever that might be. Yeah, so
that option is pretty fantastic.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's also, I think it's great for growing families that, well, my thing is that, you know, the elderly are kind of put aside now.
Right.
And, you know, so this could be something that would enhance that unity of family.
Absolutely.
Where, you know,
grandparents
grandma
could be down the backyard, but still there with the kids.
Yeah,
and-
that's right. Or, you know, other siblings that,
Yeah.
you know, may not be ready to leave home.
Yeah, exactly.
But are they ever ready to leave home? Really?
Yeah, that's
When
right.
they've
Or
got
they
a
come
great
back.
house.
don't
That's
they?
right, yeah.
So,
So there's so many different applications for that.
yeah, and so I'm quite obsessed with it now. So I'm doing lots of research and talking to builders and everyone, and yeah, looking at that as a serious option. And I'm on a couple of housing committees here locally, so involved with a lot of the suppliers and service providers who are looking after people who are in that situation.
So is there an organisation or anything like that that's, or are you about to start that?
For tiny houses?
Yeah.
Not yet. There's a couple of groups, like there's a group down in Gosford's Central Coast who have a village kind of that they're building, and I think they have a sweat equity kind of approach where they have communal shower or communal laundry, I think, and those sorts of things, but then people can build their own house there, and that's part of their payment.
Oh,
So
wow, that's a great little venture, isn't it?
yeah, so that's still being investigated. But I think some communities have issues with if they're in a communal way. Yeah, and I'm looking at it more as something for mum and dad investors to maybe give them some extra income, but also provide housing for someone, because you could build one from anywhere between a decent property between $60,000 and $100,000. Granny flats tend to be more the $150,000. So this is much more affordable. If people can't afford an investment property, they could do this. Yeah, so
That's a
looking into
great,
that.
yeah, well.
And they're movable, so you know,
that's
if
the
you don't want it
wonderful part.
anymore, it can be moved.
Because a lot of people think, you know, like, well, one thing is with a granny flat,
Yeah.
it's permanent.
It's permanent.
So should the family want to move the house, they can't take the granny flat with them.
That's right.
But they can take the tiny house.
You can take Granny with you anywhere. So
That's
yeah, so
it just
I'm
sounds
quite
like
obsessed with them. Yeah.
this sounds like a great project, and we'll get back to you on that. We'll have you on the couch
Yeah,
again to tell us
that'd be
about the
great.
outcome of all that for sure.
Yeah.
Um,
And I just think from an environmental perspective, it has a lower footprint. You know, a lot of people have stress because they've got too much stuff too. You know, and they're cluttered, their mind's cluttered, they're spending their whole weekend looking after their property, and this way you probably just have what you actually need to live.
and that's the thing, is saying like clutter, to alleviate all that clutter. So,
And
you know,
noise.
clearing your mind of clutter.
Absolutely.
You know, it's so refreshing, isn't it? Although
And
I'd
I-
probably be the worst with 300 pairs of shoes or something that I have. Can't wear any
An
of them.
Imelda tiny house. I know for me, one of the biggest things I've done just this year and recently in living more of my optimism. This is my year of being up myself. So air off myself for the year. But one of the things I've been doing is slow mornings. So I've been practicing slow mornings, and that's all about creating that space. So I won't take meetings before 10 a.m. I might go for coffee with someone or catch up or go for a walk, but it's stuff that's by my choice. So, you know, I won't start working in that until about 10 a.m. so that I can spend time with my dogs, I can walk, I can make a good breakfast, I can meditate and do yoga and just ease into the day. And I've found that's made a huge difference to my state of mind and my own sense of calm and peace. And I know some people are going to a day job, you know, I work for myself, so they have to be at work at 8 or 9, but thinking about where could I create some space for myself. And last week I ran some workshops for Valentine's Day for women to be up themselves more. And there was one lady at that, and she said she's introduced at the top and tail of her day. So she says, I start with me and I end with me.
That is
So
fantastic.
she just does 5 minutes in the morning and 5 at night that are just for her. So she starts.
So
her
she
day.
just gets up that little bit extra early
Yeah,
and
just
spends the
does
time.
5 minutes
that's a great
with a cup of
hint.
tea or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And so she said, I start the day with me and I end with me.
That's
and
fantastic.
making herself a priority. And I just thought that was wonderful.
Well, anyone can do that. Like,
Yeah.
it doesn't take much to do
Absolutely.
that. But
It's free.
discipline.
Yeah.
Yeah. Discipline.
Yeah.
Get up that 5 minutes
And the
earlier.
thought of putting yourself forward without feeling guilty about that.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Don't feel the guilt.
Yeah.
Do it. Just do it for yourself.
Yeah.
Because the outcome is quite extraordinary.
Yeah.
You know, you're just so more in tune with the day and get so much more done, and your
calm.
headspace is much better, and
Yeah.
you know, you can get up yourself, sort of thing.
Okay, come on. Start a movement.
So, okay, at the end of every show,
Yeah.
I, because of my viewers, and some want to be out there and they've lived, you know, a lot. Maybe they're going through stuff right now in the workplace, and they're just at their wits' end as to what to do about it.
Yeah.
So I usually ask my guests to look down the camera and to actually give them a message of hope or something positive that you'd like to leave my viewers with.
Yeah.
So do you think you could do
Oh,
that?
yeah. Let me think. Well, what I would say is no matter what you're going through, and as dark as sometimes it gets, I think one of the best pieces of advice that I got given, well, two things actually. One was by one manager, and he said to eat things like an elephant, so one chunk at a time. So as much as you might be in the depths of something that's really big, just go, what's my next move? Just my next step, one thing at a time. And the other thing was, which I got told by a beautiful American Indian woman, and that was, it is what it is. And so really just accepting where you're at, and then starting to look, what's my upside? So what can I do about that? What do I have control over? And not to look at all the things that other people are doing to you or are happening around you. It's really, that's what being up yourself is about, is bringing in back in the control of what can I impact on or affect. And in really dark situations, that may only be your mindset. And it reminds me of the beautiful book by Viktor Frankl called Man's Search for Meaning. And he wrote that after being, in the Holocaust and a prisoner of war. And he wrote about the only thing that we can impact is our own thoughts. And what I've found that's really done the best of that for me has been my breath. And I met a beautiful man, Mahendra, while I was at a meditation and mindfulness retreat once. And he asked me, do you want to live a long life? And I was like, yeah, of course. And he said, well, you're not going to, because your breath is too shallow. And I was like, oh. And he said to me that a dog breathes so many breaths a minute, say 60, and only lives for 15 years. An elephant or a tortoise breathes only 6 times a minute and lives to be 150. So he said, lengthen your breath and you lengthen your life. So if I could leave one tip with you, it's just to take that moment at the beginning and the end of the day, perhaps, and just take 3 long, deep breaths. Yeah.
It's fabulous. Even when you're training, you know, like it's all about the breath, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Everything.
So, yeah, well, that's great.
We should
Thank
take
you.
a breath. I feel like I've talked a lot.
A nice, big, long, slow breath. To add a few years, maybe. So, thank you to my viewers tonight, and each and every night. You're always so supportive, and I get some great feedback from the shows. And I'd like to thank quite a few of you. I won't thank you all because, I would be here all night and have to take so many breaths. But tonight I say thank you, Beck Cassidy. Thank you, Joanne Quirk. Thank you, Amy Crossan. Thank you, Kylie Quinn, Lexi Notoris, Michelle Livingston, Jackie Saunders, Kimmy Young. Thank you very much, Kimmy. Debbie O'Donoghue, thank you so much. And Frank Day, and I hope the operation goes well and you're feeling on top of it all. Take a good, deep, long breath, Frank Day. Michelle Wilcox, Margaret Moffat, and Monica Gilbert. Thank you so much to each and every one of you, for all of you, for taking the time to support me each and every week. And I'll see you next week. Thank you for that, and bye for now.
Thanks, Kelly.